Good to see everybody. How's it going? And so today we're going to be looking at Abimelech's dream. This is episode 23 as we've been going through our study. And so on dreams. And so now we're going to begin to take apart these dreams and we're going to look at all of them as they occur in the Bible, just bit by bit. So Abimelech's dream is the first one that we see recorded. So it's going to be over in Genesis chapter 20. So let's head over and let's begin to look at the text. Okay, so here we are, and it begins in 20, and it says that from there, Abraham traveled to the region of the Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. And so while he was staying in Gerar, now Abraham said about his wife Sarah, she's my sister. So King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. By the way, this is a Philistine area. And so Abimelech means my father's king. He's a Philistine king. He's a Gentile by all purposes of how we read this story. And so remember, Abraham's nervous. He's always nervous, by the way. His wife is such a hottie that he's always worried that people are going to be like, hey, let's kill him and take her and make her our wife. So now, so it says verse 3 or 2 says, so King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. So sure enough, the man found her to be very attractive, brought her. Now, look at what it says at verse 3. So, but God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, you're about to die because of the woman you've taken, for she's a married woman. So we'll stop. This is one of those message dreams, right? Doesn't really know if there's anything specific, symbolic there, but we do know that God comes to Abimelech and says, I'm going to kill you because you've taken a married woman. Now, verse 4, Abimelech had not approached her, meaning he hadn't even done anything. He hadn't touched her, there's been nothing that's involved there. And said, Lord, would you destroy a nation even though it's innocent? Didn't he himself say, she's my sister, and she herself, he's my brother? I did this with a clear conscience and clean hands. So Abimelech, by the way, is a pagan individual, and yet still understands that the God that he's talking to is God. Now, when he says to him, Lord, he's referring to him as master. That's not the divine name, Yahweh, but he's still understanding that he's had an encounter with God. That's really clear. So this is going on in the dream, right? He said, look, I had a clear conscience in how I did this. Look at verse 8, or verse 6. Then God said to him in a dream, yes, I know that you did this with a clear conscience. I've also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I have not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you'll live. But if you do not return to her, know that you will certainly die, you and all who are yours. Now early in the morning, Abimelech got up, called all his servants together, and personally told them all these things, and they were terrified. Now what's really interesting about that, by the way, if you read that story, is when Abraham is going in this area, right? Notice what he says about them. It's actually down at the bottom. It says they were all fearful, and Abraham will say later in verse 11, there's no fear of God here. So immediately they hear from this message about God, and they're terrified. Now look at verse 9. Verse 9, Abimelech called Abraham in and said to him, what have you done to us? How did I sin against you that you brought such enormous guilt on me and my kingdom? And why you have done things to me that should never be done? And Abimelech asked Abraham, what made you do this? Abraham replied, I thought there is absolutely no fear of God in this place. They'll kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So when God had me wander from my father's house, I said to her, show you're loyal to me wherever we may go, and say about me, he's my brother. Kind of a lot to unpack there. Not going to do that in this one about Abraham and his half-sister being his wife and Torah prohibitions against that, but this is prior to the giving of the law anyways. Not going to talk about that right now, but notice what happens. Verse 14, Abimelech took flocks and herds, male and female slaves, gave them to Abraham, returned his wife to Sarah, said to him, and Abimelech said, look, my land is before you, settle wherever you want. And he said to Sarah, look, I'm giving your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It's a verification of your honor to all who are with you. You're fully vindicated. And then Abraham prayed to God, God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female slaves so they could bear children. For the Lord had completely closed all the wombs of Abimelech's household on the account of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Okay, so let's unpack that for just a second. First off, one of the things you got to notice, right? It's a negative dream. Here is this guy who doesn't know the Lord, but God comes to him, and when he appears to him, boom, immediately this guy knows that he's dealing with God. He knows that whether he understands who he is based on the Bible, he probably doesn't. Maybe he just understands him as some sort of God, but at least he knows he has authority when he calls him Lord. He knows that this God is over him. God can wipe him out if he needs to. That's important to recognize. The other thing that's important that you see in this dream, and what I want you to see is over the next few weeks when we go through this, is there's a pattern here. The point in this dream is that he needs to return this woman, and then he needs to seek out Abraham, because remember what it says here, right? It says that he is a prophet and he will pray for you. You see that in verse 7. And he says, verse 7, he says, return, he's a prophet, he'll pray for you and you'll live. So it's important that God wants this man, this Gentile, so to speak, to be connected with one of his own people for a specific reason that this prophet would then pray for him. Now, what's also weird in the story is the story kind of sounds as if he brings her in, first night in, boom, that he has this dream. It appears that maybe that's not the case. It appears that maybe she's been in there for a while, and that's what's so significant of the fact that God has kept him and put roadblocks in from touching her. Because remember that last line is that he healed, notice what it says about it. It says he healed him and his wife and the slaves in the kingdom, right? And so they could bear children. So he healed Abimelech, his wife, and female slaves. So what had happened? How long did it take for people to realize they're not having babies anymore? And obviously, you know what? Here's an interesting little side note. That was a huge blessing to have babies, and to finally have that spigot turned off and no babies was seen as judgment already, and they needed to do whatever it could take to bring them back. We live in a culture, it's like, that's awesome, we should have none. That is such a terrible thing. Biblically speaking, God is over the womb, and here we are, another video, another time, but just a cool detail there. But here's what's important, is this dream, the pattern is, it's negative towards this Gentile, but if he can go and talk to one of God's people, things will be better in the end. And so this is a cool thing to see, but it's something that just take note over time. It's going to, there'll be little pieces. We're kind of coming up with a theology of dreams, so to speak, as we walk through this. So just another thing to remember, notice in this, there is no waking up and wondering, did God really speak to me? When you see this, even with pagans in the dreams, at least the evidence that we have in the Bible, there is no question it is from God. And so that's important. And as long as and what you're going to see is when Gentiles are involved, there will be some sort of connection to a covenantal person, a Jew, so to speak, that will bring them, that God will work through them for this process. Okay, that's it for now. We'll talk tomorrow, and we'll take on the second dream that occurs right after that. See if any of y'all can figure out which one it is.